The school bus rumbles down a deserted road, its headlights cutting through the looming darkness. Laughter and chatter fill the air, the carefree joy of a class trip. But something sinister lurks beneath the surface, a creeping dread that whispers of forgotten tragedies and unseen horrors. These are not your typical field trip stories. These are tales of terror, whispered by those who dared to venture into the shadows and live to tell the tale. Prepare yourselves, dear viewers, for tonight we delve into the abyss of 3 more disturbing field trip horror stories. The air hung heavy and still, a stark contrast to the laughter and joyous screams that once filled this space. Rusted Ferris wheels scratched at the sky, their carriages dangling like skeletal fingers. The chipped and faded paint on the carousel horses seemed to peel further with each gust of wind, revealing the rotted wood beneath. They stood in the heart of a forgotten playground, a ghost of childhood dreams turned to dust. The silence was the first thing that struck them. No excited screams, no carnival music, just the unsettling hum of cicadas and the distant caw of a crow. Their teacher, a chipper young woman with a naive enthusiasm for educational opportunities, tried to inject some life in the desolate scene. She pointed out faded signs advertising cotton candy and hot dogs, her voice echoing strangely in the stillness. But even her cheerfulness seemed to falter. Her smile strained as she glanced nervously at the shadows lengthening around them. They walked past boarded-up game booths, their once vibrant colors now faded and peeling. A lone teddy bear, its fur matted and gray, lay discarded on the ground, its lifeless eyes seeming to follow them. A chill settled over the group, a primal fear of the unknown creeping in like a fog. One of the students, a boy named David, pointed to a derelict roller coaster, its tracks twisting and turning like a metal serpent frozen in time. "Imagine the rides," he said, his voice barely a whisper. As they ventured deeper into the park, the shadows seemed to grow longer, stretching out like grasping claws. The air grew colder, sending shivers down their spines. The silence was broken only by their footsteps and the occasional unsettling creak of metal. They reached the entrance of a funhouse, its once mirrored walls now cracked and distorted. A sign above, its letters barely clinging to the rotting wood, read "Enter if you dare." A nervous giggle rippled through the group, but no one dared to move. Suddenly, David cried out, clutching his arm. "Something scratched me," he exclaimed, his voice high with panic. A thin red line appeared on his arm, as if he had brushed against something sharp. But there was nothing around him, nothing that could have caused such a mark. Their teacher, now visibly shaken, decided it was time to leave. "All right, everyone," she said, her voice tight, "let's stick together and head back to the bus." Relief washed over the students, but as they turned to leave, they heard it. The woods whispered secrets in the rustling leaves and the snapping twigs. Sunlight struggled to penetrate the dense canopy, casting long, eerie shadows that danced and shifted with the wind. It was a scene straight out of a campfire story, and as they ventured deeper into the woods, a sense of unease settled over the group of students. Their field trip, initially focused on ecological conservation, had taken an unexpected turn. Their guide, a seasoned park ranger with a weathered face and calloused hands, had suggested a detour, a visit to an old ranger cabin nestled deep within the woods. A relic of the past, he'd called it, his eyes twinkling with a strange glint. The cabin stood at the end of a narrow, overgrown path, shrouded in an unnatural silence. Its once bright logs were now rotting and moss-covered, the windows boarded shut, giving it the appearance of a watchful, malevolent eye. A shiver ran down their spines as they approached, the air growing thick with the smell of damp earth and decaying wood. "No one's lived here for decades," the park ranger explained, his voice low and raspy. "But they say the old ranger who built this place still keeps an eye on things." He chuckled softly, a sound that held a hint of something unsettling. They circled the cabin, their fingers trailing over the rough logs, their eyes scanning the darkened windows. Inside, they could make out the faint outline of furniture, shrouded in dust and cobwebs. It felt as if time had stood still within those walls, as if the cabin held its breath, waiting for them to leave. As they rounded the back of the cabin, one of the students, a girl named Emily, noticed something odd. "Look," she whispered, pointing to a patch of disturbed earth near the back door. Footprints. The footprints were fresh, much too large to belong to any of them. They led into the woods, disappearing into the undergrowth. A wave of unease washed over the group. They were not alone. The park ranger, seemingly unfazed, dismissed their concerns with a wave of his hand. "Probably just a hiker," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. He glanced nervously at the woods, his hand subtly moving towards the walkie-talkie on his belt. The wind picked up, swirling leaves around their feet and carrying with it a strange, low hum. It was a sound that seemed to vibrate in their bones, a sound that spoke of something ancient and unknown. The students exchanged nervous glances, their initial excitement replaced with a growing sense of dread. Suddenly, the hum intensified, morphing into a blood-curdling shriek that echoed through the trees. Birds took flight, their wings beating frantically against the silence that followed. The students huddled together, their eyes wide with terror, their breath catching in their throats. The park ranger's face had gone pale, his jaw clenched tight. "Get inside," he barked, his voice tight with urgency. He fumbled with the cabin door, his hands shaking. Now, they piled into the cabin, stumbling over each other in their haste to escape the unseen terror that lurked outside. The park ranger slammed the door shut, bolting it with a heavy wooden beam. They huddled together in the darkness, listening to the frantic pounding on the door, each blow sending shivers down their spines. The island welcomed them with an unsettling silence. The gentle lapping of waves against the shore did little to break the eerie stillness that hung heavy in the air. A shroud of mist clung to the island, obscuring its edges and casting long, eerie shadows from the gnarled trees that lined the shore. They had been warned about the island, whispered tales passed down through generations of locals. They called it the Isle of Whispers, a place where the veil between worlds was thin, where the echoes of the past lingered, and where the restless dead roamed free. But their youthful curiosity, fueled by a thirst for adventure, had overridden any sense of foreboding. Their boat had barely touched the sandy shore when the feeling of unease settled over them. The air felt different here, charged with an unseen energy, a palpable sense of something watching them from the shadows. Their teacher, a seasoned historian with a passion for folklore, tried to lighten the mood, regaling them with tales of pirates and buried treasure. But even his enthusiasm seemed strained, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. They ventured deeper into the island's heart, following a narrow path that snaked through dense vegetation. The air grew thick with the smell of salt and decay, the only sound, the crunch of their footsteps on the dry leaves, and the occasional cry of a seagull overhead. As they walked, they noticed strange symbols carved into the trunks of trees, ancient markings that sent shivers down their spines. Their teacher, his face pale with concern, muttered something about ancient rituals and forgotten deities. He quickened their pace, his eyes darting nervously into the surrounding woods. They reached a clearing, a circle of barren earth surrounded by towering trees. In the center stood a crumbling stone altar, its surface stained with what looked like dried blood. A cold wind swept through the clearing, stirring the leaves and carrying with it a faint whisper, a sound like voices carried on the wind. Suddenly, one of the students, a boy named Daniel, cried out. He stumbled back, his eyes wide with terror, pointing to a spot just beyond the altar. "There's someone there," he whispered, his voice trembling. They all turned to look, their hearts pounding in their chests. And then they saw it. A figure, shrouded in shadow, stood at the edge of the clearing. The bus ride home was a blur of hushed whispers and nervous glances. The once carefree students now sat in stunned silence, their faces pale, their eyes haunted by the horrors they had witnessed. The shadows seemed to stretch longer, the setting sun painting the sky in hues of blood orange and bruised purple. The echoes of laughter and screams lingered in their minds, a chilling reminder that some places hold secrets best left undisturbed. Remember, dear viewers, as you drift off to sleep tonight, that the world is full of shadows, and sometimes the most terrifying destinations are not found on any map, but in the darkest corners of our own minds.